for Hopalong Hollow. This is Jerry, and today we're talking about poppies, peas, and roses. We're talking about poppies because I have a box full of poppies here. Poppy roots, that is. Papaver Oriental. This is Oriental Poppies. These are perennial poppy roots. I've already planted half of them, but the rest of them have got to go in today. This came in on the same day, so there's quite a bit to do here. There are bare root roses here, and there are potted roses here, so they're going to be planted a little bit differently. So we're going to talk about that, and then of course we're going to talk about peas, because you know, if you watch my channel, you know I'm obsessed with planting green peas and sweet peas. So we've got a lot to do today. So let's just get busy, because it's going to be a very long day in the garden for me. It's always so exciting to open these boxes of roses because they were ordered, many of them, way back in September, and I've forgotten what I purchased. But now, here they are in all their glory. And some of them, most of them, are leafless, some are bare root, and some of them are actually looking like they are ready to go. So this is going to be pretty exciting. It's a good thing that I've kept a notebook with all these roses in them so that I know where I had planned on putting them, because as I said, it's been months since I ordered these. Now, a lot of these I can thank my son and my daughter-in-law for, because they gave me a gift certificate to the Antique Rose Emporium over Christmas. So thank you, Hera and Justin. The David Austin roses here. Now, these are all bare root roses. So these are planted a little bit differently. They simply come in a bag. There they are. I don't really want to open these up yet. Once you get them though and you're ready to plant them, they need to be soaked in a bucket of water just to rehydrate the roots for at least 2 hours, a minimum of 2 hours. So I've actually had several of them already soaking in water, and they're ready to put in. So I think we're going to start out today with the roses. The thing I did when I ordered the roses months ago is I took notes on everything so that I knew why I ordered it and where does it go, does it take full sun, does it take shade, all the little notes that I need to have for when the roses do come to refresh my memory. Now I know where I can put them. And of course I might change my mind here and there, but at least I have a good idea of what I got just by looking through my notebook. And I do the same thing with anything I'm planting, even seeds. So even with the sweet peas, I keep notes on what I've purchased, where I purchased it, and then when I planted it. It's just a really good idea to remind yourself what you bought, where you got it, did it work out, when did you plant it, and it gives you a lot of information for the next time around. If you made any mistakes, or if you did something the right way, that really helps to have a notebook. One thing I love about the David Austin roses is they give you this beautiful book full of ideas. And this is one I planted, Gertrude Jekyll. This is going to grow right up here along, I hope, right up that wall along the side. Now, this rose can take some shade, which is a good thing, because this garden in the far back only gets about 5 hours of sun every day, so it's semi-shade really. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you want to plant something in the shade, it has to be a rose that will actually do well in the shade. So I get so many beautiful ideas and reminders of the colors when I look through this David Austin book. They also supplies you with a planting guide, which is absolutely very, very handy. I do believe that there's a planting guide here with the order from Antique Rose Emporium, but this is pretty darn handy just to refresh your memory. Even if you've planted 20 roses the past year, you still can forget how to do it. I know I do. But then again, I'm not a spring chicken anymore without a great memory. So let's plant some roses. With bare root roses, you want to soak them for a minimum of 2 hours in a bucket of water. I'm planting 3 today. The rest I've left in the bag because I'm not ready. But I'm going to do 2 climbing roses over there in the Beatrix Potter patch, up against the potting shed wall, along with the clematis that's growing there. So I have a Gertrude Jekyll here, which is a hot pink. climbs up to about 10 feet. And this is Generous Gardener. And this one climbs up to about 15 feet. Now these I chose for that spot because they will take semi-shade. And that garden over there up against the wall only gets about 4 hours of afternoon sun. So I just hope that's enough sun for these roses. So let's go plant these two. What I want to do is loosen up my soil with fork. Then I'm going to dig a nice hole about 16 by 16, nice and roomy to accommodate my rose roots. Then I'm going to put in some compost and sprinkle some antifungal on the roots, water it, cover it up, and that's that. Mixed in a shovelful of compost into the hole and worked it in a little bit. And I've also taken a shovelful and mixed it in with the dirt, the soil that was removed from the hole. I think my hole is pretty deep, probably deeper than I need it because these roots on this Gertrude Gico are not very long. Now, they recommend that you sprinkle your roots with this fungi, which is basically just falling into the hole, but that's okay too. It doesn't really stick to the roots very well, if you ask me. And you have to use a lot of it, and it is rather expensive, but if it gives your roses a boost, I guess it's worth it, because it's a one-time thing. But it's called mycorrhizal fungi, mycorrhizal fungi. You can buy this on Amazon, or you can buy it where you get your roses. You buy them online from David Austin. You can buy this. Now I want to fit my little rose in here right in the center of my hole. I want the bottom of my stems to be 2 inches. The soil needs to be 2 inches above the bottom of my stems. So right about here. So let me secure it in here. Now this is a climbing rose, so I should be tilting it towards this direction. I'm not going to do that in this case because I think I'm just going to train it as it grows. I just want to see how this works out. So, see how we can get this in here to the right depth. Okay, so I'm here, right about up to my stems. But I still want to go 2 inches above those. Now the location of where you put your rose is pretty important. For example, the hole that you see right now, a week ago, I knew my roses were coming in, so I had dug a couple of holes here. Then it started to rain and rain and rain, and this hole, this is before I amended, I've amended it now, but before I amended it, that hole stayed full of water for just a full week. It just didn't drain. And here's why. If you look behind, you can see where we took up an apple tree. That is what was there. Just pure clay, and it just doesn't drain. And you just don't want your roses sitting in water constantly and getting waterlogged. You don't want any plant to do that. So I really had to come in here because this is such a sunny, beautiful spot for a couple roses. So I really had to come in here and amend the soil. And it takes a lot of digging and a lot of work, but it's worth it in the end because your rose is going to have to live here for its entire life. So I put a lot of more sand in here and lots of compost, well-rotted compost. And I think now the soil should be pretty good to plant 2 Lady Gardener David Austin roses. So that's what we're going to do right now in this hole. Just for another brief. This is the rose we're planting 2 roses here. This is a rather tall English shrub rose. This is a David Austin rose, the Lady Gardener, large shrub, 4.5 foot tall, 4.5 foot wide, apricot, medium tea fragrance, and of course this likes full sun. Quartered rosettes, and this is the one we're going to put right here in the back of the maiden's garden. When you're planting the David Austin roses, they recommend that you use the mycorrhizal fungi and sprinkle it on the roots before you actually bury the bare root rose. Now I found this in several different price ranges. This is 3 ounces. It'll only treat 3 rose bushes, but it's $8 a package. This is $8 a package, only 2 ounces. This is 3.5 ounces, and it gave me, it was $10, but I found some that was a pound, and it was $19.99. So I'm waiting for that to come in. This is grainy. It doesn't stick to those rose roots very well. This is a powder, and I think I like the powder better. You'll need a tablespoon to sprinkle a tablespoon of this on those root roses before you put them in. What's the purpose of this? Well, let's just say, here's what it says on the package. It's root growth, it's drought tolerant, it helps it to intake the nutrients, and it gives you a higher yield of roses. At least that's the theory. So if you can help your roses out, even with a little extra expense, let's just give it a try and see if it does do the job. I'm taking about a tablespoon of this mycorrhizal fungi and I'm sprinkling it on my root system here. A lot of it will just fall into that hole, which is fine. And so I put a shovelful of compost in there. And now I'm going to fill it in. Well, what's that? Give it a good stomping first so get that soil nice and firm in there. Okay, and now what I want to do, you can see where all these stems meet and join together. We want to take the soil about 1 to 2 inches above this joining right here. So that's on a bare root rose. Now if you're planting a potted rose, you're going to just plant evenly with the soil in the pot. But we'll do a potted rose too. Okay, so I want to cover that. So it just looks like 3 separate stems are coming up out of the ground, I think. And then you're going to give it a nice water, and then you want to mulch all around it. There, I am so dirty. So again, I'm just going to reiterate how deep to plant these. You want to go above, 1 to 2 inches above where all these little stems come together. So you want to plant it about that deep, so that they all look like they're sticking up out of the ground separately rather than all attached to one another. Okay, we are on day 3 of planting roses, and I'm going to open up this box of rolled doll roses. This is also a David Austin rose. There's 5 bare root roses in this box, and that's because I'm planting a small hedge. So that's one reason I need so many roses. You may wonder why I have got so many. Several of these are going to be hedges. So this is the beautiful color here. It's a medium shrub, apricot, medium tea fragrance, bloom size medium, repeat blooms. And supposedly it gets 4 foot tall by 4 foot wide. I'm hoping it doesn't get 4 foot tall. I don't want it that tall, but I'm sure that we can control it with a lot of pruning. So this looks like a beauty. We'll take it out of the bag. I'll soak it. So here we have the bare root roses, and I'm probably going to soak them for about 4 hours while I go dig the holes. I won't bore you with that part. But we will go ahead and put in some of the potted roses in the meantime. There's supposed to be 5 here. Yes, there are 5. You just put them in the bucket. All right, we'll just leave these soaking for probably about 4 hours or so. That should do it. Another planting that we have to do today are these Oriental Poppies that I have had in storage now for about 2 months. Since I bought them, the ground has been frozen and I haven't been able to put them in, but they've been pretty secure in these bags. These are Oriental Poppies. This particular brand is from Eden Brothers. Poppies, Helen Elizabeth. Beautiful. So I'm going to follow the advice of P. Allen Smith because I think he's one of the most knowledgeable gardeners on YouTube, and I'm going to follow his advice on putting in the poppy roots. I've never done poppy roots before. The first thing, I've always done seeds, but the first thing he says is to enrich your soil with not only compost, but also sand, because poppies and peonies, which we're also planting today, need a really good draining soil. So we are planting in the Beatrix Potter patch. So I'll go through this process in 2 different garden spaces. Now this is the Beatrix Potter patch, and I have amended the soil with a lot of sand and compost. And I've really worked it into the soil because what I want to do is dig a hole deep enough to accommodate the roots of this Oriental Poppy. My root slayer. This is a fantastic little tool from Radius. And if you want to dig nice deep holes, the easy way, get a root slayer. Now, I worked in that sand into the soil, so I've got a nice free draining mix here, and I think that's probably the key to these Oriental Poppies. When you're doing annual poppies, you don't have to think about things like this because you just sprinkle them on the soil, just toss them in the garden in the winter, and they come up in the spring. But that's not the case with these. So here we are, once again. We've got our nice little fuzzy top here and our nice straight roots. I'm going to go straight down into that soil because I want to plant right up to about the head right here, because I've got all this nice growth coming in. You can see we've already got little leaves coming up, so those need to be above the soil surface. So I'm going to plant it in here, secure it in, give it a good water, and let that water drain out, then fill in the hole. So this is the Beatrix powder patch that we actually worked on last year, but it's got some new things in it this year, because last year about half of this bed was filled with annuals, which do not come back. So I took those annual spaces and I decided to put in the perennials. I think I put in, there are 17 Oriental Poppies now. There are 7 peonies in here. Those were what I put in yesterday. I put in a Gertrude Jekyll climbing rose to go up climbing the side of the shed here with the clematis. And then what already existed in this garden were phloxes, the foxglove, the sedum, there's liatris, and some daisies, and several other perennials. Now the spaces that are going to be empty in between these perennials, those will be filled with annuals once again. But I'll probably just sprinkle the seed instead of doing transplants from the nursery beds. The bed that I'm going to be working on now and planting some poppies and roses and bulbs in is basically an extension of the Beatrix Potter garden. They're only separated by a small brick pathway. So what I want to do is I want to have a sense of continuity in here, so that by repeating many of the plants that are in that bed. The conditions in this garden are a little bit sunnier, and yet once the trees leaf out, we've got a lot of shade underneath those trees. So there are some shade plants in here that don't fit well in the Beatrix Potter patch. But the first thing I need to do is clean this thing out. It's been a mess all winter long, and it's time to get in here and do something. I think the first thing I'm going to do is flatten out the top of that boxwood hedge right there. Well, I don't really need your assistance today, but here you are. Anyway, I think this would be a good example on how to show you how to put in new plantings among existing plants that are already here growing, and sometimes you can barely see where they are. So the first thing I'm going to do in this garden, I'm going to get up the weeds, then I'm going to find the perennials that are just now poking up through the ground, and I'm going to cover them with a basket so that I don't dig there and I don't step on them while I'm putting in the new plants. So that's my first step. In the Beatrix Potter patch, I was able to amend large swaths of ground because I wasn't interfering with any other plants, so I could do all of it at once. But in this case, I'm having to work in between these plants, and you can see where I've marked little plants that are coming up. Here we see some astilbes, and it turns out that in this garden there are 7 of them. So I'm going to work around these and in between them with the poppies. So in this case, I'm just having to do this one little section at a time. But since everything is a perennial, I won't ever have to do this again. I'm just going to be working in between these plants. I'll do a little batch of poppies right here. Here is my mixture of sand and compost and a little bit of peat. I'm just going to take it by the scoopful, work it into some of these little spaces, open spaces here, and plant my roots in there. Now I've thoroughly dug that mixture, the sand and the compost. I've really worked it into the soil, and I've dug 2 holes so far. I'm going to place my poppy roots in these holes straight down, and you can see what these look like. You can see the root here, and then you can see that because I've kept these in storage for a while, they are already growing. The top is growing. I want that just above the soil right there. I'm going to put these straight into the hole. I'm going to water it, and then I'm going to fill in the soil and go on to the next. Now the difference between these and your poppy seeds, like your Shirley poppies or your opium poppies, is these will come back year after year because these are Oriental poppies and they're perennials, whereas your other poppies are annuals. They'll grow really well for you from seed, but they don't come back, although they will reseed often in your garden. Water, as you can see, it's draining pretty well right now because I had it almost all the way up to the top a few seconds ago. So this is a good drainage area. And now I'm going to fill in the soil and still exposing this fuzzy little hairy top here. Well, I know it looks like Fort Knox in here right now, but since you know that I have chickens who love to dig in fresh, delicious compost, you understand why this is temporarily here. This is just to protect the plants while they get a good start. So what I managed to get in here were 2 more David Austin roses, which are called Moistened Wood. Beautiful crimson rose, shrub rose, English shrub rose, which grows about 3 feet tall, 2.5 feet wide. They are sort of centered right up here towards the front. And amongst those are the Oriental Poppies, which will be salmon colored, and they are about 30 inches tall, 30 to 40 inches tall. So they'll be standing amongst the roses as they grow. This isn't necessarily going to happen this year. Here we have the astilbes. They've just grown just from yesterday. Look at that. Amazing. And I'm really pleased that these penstemons have been growing all winter long. These are perennials that I did in the nursery beds last year, my little mini nursery beds, and I just put the seedlings in here when they were ready last year, and they've just grown and grown and grown, and they should be blooming this year. And they are a nice pink lavenderish color up along the border front here, which would be 12 to 16 inches, I suppose. So, and then interspersed in clumps here and there throughout this garden are purple sensation alliums and gigantic globe alliums. So this should be a lovely color combination garden. And then we have some roses here, which were already have been here for quite a few years. I just pruned those right down about 14 inches from the ground. And if you have some roses that are fairly established, like you've got a little shrub rose and you want to trim it a bit, at least take 1/2 inch off of every stem. And if you have any that are really disproportionately longer than the others, cut them down so they're fairly even. And here's a rose that I paid about $10 for. You don't have to spend a fortune for roses. And let's see. Well, it doesn't look so great right now. But I gave it a good fish food fertilizer yesterday. We'll see if it does better this year. I hope so. These always do great. So anyway, it looks pretty horrible right now, but give it a little time and I think I'll be able to show you something very pretty. Try to think about the heights and the colors. Of course, you're an experienced gardener, you already know that, but sometimes you just have to experiment a little and see what happens, see what comes up. That's basically what I'm doing in here. Just check out these nursery bed boxes that I put in over the last 2 months or so. See if anything is happening in any of these boxes. Row is lupins, and every one of these nursery beds is full of seedlings. The yarrow is a pretty quick germinator as well, and that's a perennial, so it's good to see the perennials. Well, a little bit crowded in there down in that little bunch. Look at all those. They're going to have to be thinned out for sure. So those are doing great. Let's see, what else? Some of these aren't doing anything yet, but that's because a lot of these are perennials and they just take longer to germinate. These 2 rows of penstemons, I remember last year they really took a long time. This entire row of coneflowers, we don't have much action in yet. This is soapwort. This is a perennial. I can see a lot of seedlings in there, also in the spider plant here. So all in all, we're about half and half as far as the germination goes. The daisies, these daisies are looking really good. And the pincushion flowers are looking pretty good. More daisies. And even the hyssop over there, I noticed, is coming up. So you can see that the moisture does stay inside the bins. You can see it. And they're doing pretty well. As I said, some take longer than others. Here's some bijou peas. Look at those peas in there. Right, okay, these are coming along just very well. Here's adventure in sweet peas. I'm trying several different methods besides doing the plantings in the seed nurseries, which were very successful last year. But I also want to try a couple of these other methods that I've seen because I have so many sweet peas from many different companies. This method I saw on the Irish Gardener channel, who is gardening at Douenza, I believe, and she just uses some very deep plastic pots, fills them with her mixture, plants about 5 seeds in each pot. These pots are about 5 inches in diameter. And then she covers it with grit or vermiculite. I'm going to use a vermiculite. And then she soaks them pretty well. Then she sets them, she says, in the coldest corner of her greenhouse. But if you don't have a greenhouse, and I don't, you can set them right outside in a corner in your garden and then see what happens. Now, sweet peas are actually annuals, but this is a perennial sweet pea right here, and it's an everlasting sweet pea. This seed came from Eden Brothers, and it's a red sweet pea. So we're going to give this one a try. Wouldn't that be great? If they made perennial, or there were perennial sweet peas, wouldn't that be great? My best results from my sweet peas were in my little seed nursery boxes, but I'm running out of seed nursery boxes, so I'm going to have to go a little more standard now since I have so many sweet pea seeds. So it seems to be pretty much of the consensus, whether from gardeners all over the world, the sweet peas are pretty much planted the same way. First of all, you want a nice deep pot because they have nice long roots. They make a nice long root system, but you don't have to buy those special root trainers. I've used them twice. I didn't like them at all. But anyway, I'm going to always put 2 seeds in each little hole. I'm going to go about 1 to 2 inches deep in my nice mixture here. And you know what my mixture is because I told you last week in the first video. And then I'm going to cover these with compost, and then I'm going to put a little bit of grit or gravel over the top, water them in really, really well, and then I'm going to leave them in a protected area in the garden. I don't want to water these again until I see sprouts. Then I'll water them. I like what Charles Dowding says about double seeding in your holes. He said, plant 2 in a hole as little mates, and then when you transplant them into the garden, plant them once again as little mates. So they'll always grow up together and have a friend. I don't think he said that part, but there's another reason as well. One of your seeds may not germinate. Then you've got an empty hole. My goodness, that's not good. Anytime you can direct sow right into the garden, doing winter sowing directly into the garden in the spot that you're going to want your plant permanently without having to transplant anything, that's fantastic. That's the ideal thing to be able to do. Get your plants started early, but right in the ground where they belong. So that's what I'm doing with this old wheelbarrow that I have right here. I've planted many different things in this wheelbarrow, and this year I've got a different idea for it. So here in my wheelbarrow planter, I've got a plan of, I see visions of blue and purple and burgundy, and that's why I'm planting 3 different seeds in here for winter sowing. I've got a burgundy mix sweet pea from Eden Brothers, which grows to about 100 inches. That's going to go right in the center, And I'm hoping I'll put a little pyramid there, but I'm hoping that it'll climb tall enough to grab onto perhaps some of these branches of the dwarf peach tree. And maybe do some climbing up that tree. Then I've got a beautiful little common chive here, which is 14 inches, nice and erect. Beautiful little plant, which I'll put in the back. It's an herb, it's a perennial, keeps coming back year after year. And then along the edges I have the purple emperor nasturtium, also from Eden Brothers, and I'm hoping that those beautiful purple nasturtiums will just pour over the side of this wheelbarrow. It's a very little cozy corner here, and of course I'm an optimist, ever the optimist in my garden. I think you have to be. I made 6 holes. I've planted 2 soaked peas in each little hole in the center of this wheelbarrow. I don't think soaking really makes that much of a difference, but it's worth a try. It can't hurt anything. And now I will plant all the other seeds surrounding these peas. With the chives, I'm just going to sprinkle the seeds around the back of the bed and then lightly drop a little dusting of compost over the top. The nasturtium seeds, I just poke them in about an inch, cover them up, and then I'm going to give this whole wheelbarrow a nice good soak, and then I'm going to cover it with something I had to devise. Attractive really in the garden, to be honest with you. Not as pretty as a cloche, that's for sure, but it is going to protect these seeds, give them the same environment as the seed nurseries, and I'll just slice some little holes in the top here and there so that the moisture can get in. It's clipped on with clothespins, very simple. It can be raised up or lowered and then removed as soon as these plants are ready to face the world. So here we are back to the wheelbarrow about 7 days later, and here it is, looking pretty good. We've got the nasturtiums have germinated, we've got little seedlings for peas, the burgundy sweet peas, and the chives are actually coming up too. They're so slender and skinny that you can barely see them, but they're there. Great. Okay, these are the peas that were planted in the pots about 10 days ago. And because they've germinated and they're starting to grow, they're about 2 inches tall or so. I brought them out into the light, and now I'm giving them a good water every day. If it gets too hot, because it does come on, spring comes on pretty quickly here. Not too bad. I guess that's not too bad for early March. Did actually get a late start on putting those in. Should have done it a lot sooner. So underneath all of these cloches, back here are sugar bon edible peas, and they've all germinated. I'll probably be able to take those cones off real soon. And garlic in the back, and Swiss chard under these cloches. Under those cloches are sugar snap peas. Hopefully they'll be climbing that trellis one day. And I might even want to move those cloches now. I just was protecting them while they germinated, but most of them have germinated, so I think I'll take those cloches off so they don't get too hot. And over on this side, under the green cloches, those are beets. Well, a lot of my peas arrived 3 weeks late. They just came the other day. This company said they had some kind of problems at the warehouse, and so I wanted to winter sow these 3 weeks ago. But since they just came in, I won't be winter sowing these. I'll be sowing these in your more standard ways, in pots, window boxes, and planters, and of course directly into the garden. So that's what we'll do in the next video. And also we'll do some more potted roses in the ground. But if you want to know if you're planting your roses now and you can't remember how to do it, I do have a video I did last year, and I planted all kinds of potted roses in the ground. So I'll link that below. But I want you to see these beautiful gloves. You know I love to wear these kind of gloves. But somebody sent these to me, and wouldn't you know it, look, they have poppies all over them. I don't know where she got them, but I just think they're great. And you know, I love to wear these things. I try to hide my old hands, but these are super. So thank you so much for sending these. We'll see you next time in Hopalong Hollow, and we'll be doing more peas, more roses, and who knows what else. Maybe we'll bake a pie. See you next time in Hopalong Hollow. Bye-bye.